Good Wednesday morning. Welcome to Beginning the Word. Today we'll be looking at Titus chapter 1, verse number 9. Holding fast to the faithful word as he has been taught, that he may be able, by sound doctrine, both to exhort and convict those who contradict. Here we read another attribute of elders, pastors, shepherds, overseers, various descriptions given in the New Testament for these people, these men that Titus is supposed to appoint in every city on the island of Crete. And here we notice this attribute that we want to take an entire episode to look at is that they are holding fast to the faithful word. They're holding fast to the faithful word as he has been taught. The first thing we want to notice about this is this description of the word of God, and it is a faithful word. It is a trustworthy word. It is something that is sure and it can be counted on. As we remember back in Titus chapter 1, we read about God who cannot lie. God who cannot lie, and he has promised, and this word is faithful. Here at beginning in the word, we believe that the word of God can be counted on. We believe that it is trustworthy. And so because of that, specifically, an elder needs to hold fast to that because it is faithful. You hold on to it because it's trustworthy. We're not told to hold on to something that cannot be counted on. Rather, an elder sees the faithfulness and the trueness of the word of God. And so instead of holding to it loosely, they hold to it fast or tightly or surely, making sure that they don't let go of it. And this says something further about them, beyond the statement about the word of God, that it is sure that God, who cannot lie, has spoken it. We read that pastors, elders, shepherds, they need to hold on to it. That means elders and pastors, they must know the word of God. They must know the word of God. An elder can't just be a good person with good character. They must have a strong working knowledge of the Bible. Many of the passages that deal with elders are emphatic about the fact that they must be teachers, and this is, in fact, one of them. One of the things that distinguishes elders and their unique role in the church is the way in which they teach, in which they instruct people in the Word of God. That is a critical component of what it means to be an elder. And to know the Word of God is one thing. To understand the Word of God is one thing, but to be able to teach that requires an extra level of knowledge, an extra level of attainment. Elders are people who cannot be slouches in the book. They have to know it. Now, as we mentioned, does that mean that an elder has to know everything? Certainly not. The depth and the magnificence of the knowledge of God is completely inexhaustible. It's completely inexhaustible. So they cannot have complete and perfect knowledge. And if you go up to an elder and you stump them with a question, it doesn't mean they don't fulfill this requirement here. So what is the target that we should have in mind? What is the target? What does it mean for them to hold fast? If it doesn't mean they have to know everything there is to know, how much do they have to know? Well, we see this quality given here. They hold fast to this faithful word as they've been taught. That indicates purpose. This gives a purpose for their understanding. It gives a reason. It gives a target. It gives a goal in mind of why they understand. They don't just understand for intellectual purposes. They don't just understand so that they can know nice things. They don't just and they teach that. What is the goal here? Well, it's that he may be able by sound doctrine. By sound doctrine, and then we want to notice a couple words here. This word exhort and convict, and then those who contradict. So this sound doctrine word, what does that mean? An elder must use sound doctrine. Sound refers to healthy. It refers to something that is not unhealthy. It's not decaying. An elder must use that, and this will ultimately be in the persuasion of this person who contradicts or who does not agree. We might say the unbeliever, or at least the unconvinced. Elders need to know the Word of God to the level that they can teach it in how people will use it. And elders must use the Word. As they're trying to exhort and to convict, words we'll talk about in a moment, those who contradict, it cannot be through the weight of personality. It cannot be through emotional manipulation. It must not be through intimidation. Last time we saw that elders can't be people who are violent, back in verse number 7 and 8. Instead, elders must be people who stand on the word of God, that the word of God and sound doctrine is what makes that happen. But we need to understand here the two targets that are given: this sound doctrine, this representation of the word of God that doesn't cut corners, it doesn't take shortcuts towards those who contradict. What are they trying to do here? Well, this goal isn't just a declaration to a brick wall. As we mentioned here, this idea of knowing versus teaching here. The idea of teaching is not that they can just recite facts, but it's that they can get to exhortation and conviction, even of those who at least are unconvinced, as we see here. You can't just take a guy to lead a Bible study in front of the nicest old ladies in the church, and they like it a lot, and then say, well, he can teach, and he hold fast to the faithful word, and he can teach there. You can't say that. Elders must have training so that they can convince someone who is potentially skeptical, who contradicts, who disagrees. Now, perhaps that person ideally, at least to the level of someone who's open to being understanding. There's obviously, we're going to get to a moment later in our next episode about those who really aren't even open to being critiqued at all, who aren't open to understanding. But an elder needs to be able to be someone who can exhort and who can convict. Now, what do those words mean? What do those words mean as we think about the persuasion that goes on towards those who contradict? Well, this word exhort, it's a gentle pleading. It's an encouraging. It's very positive. Exhortation is a very positive word. It's a very gentle word. However, this word convicting is much stronger. It's much firmer. It's harder. It cuts to someone's heart. It's, we might say, a negative word. And it's negative in the sense that it's a difficult thing to endure or to go through. It's, if a person does it for the salvation of their soul, it's a positive thing, obviously. It brings about a positive result. But in terms of its harshness, it's negative in that sense, whereas exhortation is generally a positive thing. Elders need to be able to strike these two different tones. They need to be able to strike both an exhortation, a pleading to people who are willing to learn, who can be encouraged to do better, but also a convicting tone to those who need to hear that. Pastors cannot just be harsh all the time. Furthermore, they can't just be buddies all the time. They need to have the wisdom to understand which method of teaching is going to be most effective, not just what they're most comfortable doing. A lot of people, if not all of us, have somewhere we default to. Some of us default to this sort of exhortation, pleading, buddy kind of attitude, and some of us default to this sort of coach, disciplinarian, criticizing kind of person. An elder needs to be someone who can use wisdom so that they can do both of these things. They can and convict, exhort and convict those who contradict. And so pastors need to be people who have that wisdom and that ability, that can use either of these things as they hold fast to the faithful word and use sound doctrine to bring about these results here. Thank you for joining us today on Beginning the Word. It's our prayer that just as you've begun today in the Word of God, you'll live out today in the Word of God.